Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
We are getting ready to start. Please follow the instructions on this slide. If you would like to turn off your camera, and please, if you haven't yet, remain muted during the presentation. We will be having a section for questions and answers at the end, and we would love at that time if you will save your questions for that moment. You may also write questions on the chat during the presentation, and those can be then addressed at the end. So I want to thank you for being with us today and introduce us to our presentation on stress and trauma, building resilience. My name is Dr. Yafa Podvilevich-Weinberg. I am the clinical psychologist for the Holocaust Survivor Care Program. And with me is Leah Hyman, trauma clinician with JFS. Today, we will introduce you to stress and trauma and how our bodies experience both. We will talk about how we can increase our coping and build our resilience and our preparedness. Then we will actually introduce you to some specific skills that you will be able to start using. And at the end, as I mentioned, we will have time for a Q&A. So the presentation is being recorded. You are encouraged to use whatever name you want next to your name. If you wish to change that, that's totally fine. We encourage you to keep notes, especially the first part of the presentation, as we're going to do a lot of educational, and you may want to keep some notes of some of your questions or some of the issues as you are integrating the information. And we also want you to know that we have some counselors on site. So in case they are needed, we have Ariela Goldstein and Abby Goodman with us today. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Leah Hyman, who will start with the presentation.
Hi, good morning. So grateful to be here with you all today. So we're going to jump right into it and start with defining and normalizing stress and trauma. Life itself is not stressful, right? Stress is something that you and I both experience. The same situation that can be stressful for one person might not be stressful for another. For example, driving a car or a brief power outage, not that stressful for most people. But road rage or a prolonged power outage in the dead of winter, that might be more stressful for some of us. Who we are, our experiences, our knowledge, our resources can mediate the impact of any given situation and how we're going to respond and experience it. Stress is actually the body's response to anything that requires attention or action. Stress can manifest as mental, emotional, physical changes. You and I both experience potential stressors, stressful events every single day, but not necessarily are they going to lead to stress. So we have potential stressors that can be positive or negative. Positive stressors are going to be things like life cycle transitions, for example, going to college, getting married, having a kid, retiring. Those are all normally positive events that happen in life, but at the same time, they might be stressful. Getting a new job, moving to a new house or a new community can be wonderful, positive changes and stressful at the same time. And we have negative stressors. Those are things like illness, accidents, loss, divorce, conflict, including interpersonal conflict, social conflict like riots or racism, or national conflict like wars. Other negative common stressors are pandemics, natural disasters, hate crimes, and acts of terror. Natural disasters, pandemics, and acts of terror can affect hundreds, thousands, and if not millions of people. Sometimes it might affect us directly, and other times, even if we weren't physically there at the event, it can still impact us. Each of us are individually dealing with our unique set of circumstances and challenges, and therefore we're going to experience these events in different ways. What's stressful for one person, again, might not be stressful for another person. While some of us might be doing super well, isolated at home, reading books, taking on new hobbies, connecting with family and friends, some of us might be struggling to keep a job while caring for young children or an elderly parent. Some people might have a hard time returning to school or shul. We all have experienced stressors. But while some of us are affected by them, right, our bodies are showing that our bodies actually show the impact of stress or trauma. Others have been spared when dealing with even significant problems. So how's this possible? How can we improve our chances of doing well even under significant stress? What we're essentially asking is, how do we build resilience? So we're going to start by looking at some of the science behind this. Our brains are hardwired with an alarm system for our protection, and this response is automatically triggered during stressful events. Hormones are sent throughout the body to allow us to be able to support us while needing to complete certain activities or to push through this specific stressful time. This results in physical sensations, making our bodies ready in many different ways. So we're going to review what happens in our bodies as we face a challenge that demands our attention and or action. So first of all, we have the muscles. The muscles are going to tense up, right, to protect us and the body against any injury and pain. They should release the tension after the stress has passed. We have the lungs. Under stress, it's common to breathe a little more rapidly or shallow. Some might hyperventilate, get dizzy. We have the gastrointestinal system. Stress can affect our appetite. We all know that. The heart. Our heart is going to start pumping faster and stronger. What it's doing is pumping blood to muscles, actually, that's going to help us deal with the stressor. Then we have the endocrine system. During stress, our hormones are activated. Cortisol, going to be the big word here. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is sent out throughout the body daily. Every day we have cortisol pumping through our bodies. It kind of comes out in the morning when we wake up, and then it peters out throughout the day. But during the stress response, a part of the brain creates a cascade of events throughout your whole body to release more and more cortisol. As the stress increases, more cortisol is going to be released so that we can deal with the stress. Then we have the nervous system. Not surprisingly, stress also impacts the nervous system, especially our autonomic nervous system, known as the ANS. The ANS has two parts. So we have one part intended for rest and relaxation. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. And the other is intended for fight or flight. That's the sympathetic nervous system. When a stressful event occurs, the amygdala, which is the alarm bells of the brain, activates the sympathetic nervous system. Again, sympathetic nervous system is the system that's going to intend for fight or flight. That's going to play a role in our fear and anxiety responses. Again, when your body is in stress, fight or flight response, it puts all the energy and focus into resolving this immediate conflict, this perceived danger or threat. Now, cortisol can be wonderfully helpful when you need to respond to things that demand an action in the moment. However, when cortisol is constantly there long-term, for example, when we heard that our friends and neighbors at Congregation Beth Israel are amidst a hostage situation, right? Cortisol is being released hour after hour as the day went on, hour after hour, more and more cortisol is being released. And that was preparing the body.
Sunday, Monday. It's been 5 days.
Just going to remind all participants to mute if you can. So, right, more and more cortisol is being released, and that is our body's preparing to fight or flight. It's ready. It's there's danger, right? We all felt that. We're ready to pounce and fight or flight. But in reality, all we were able to do is sit back and wait. When the cortisol levels are higher than they need to be, it can affect our bodies. We could feel tired, lose our appetite, or have trouble sleeping. Let's take a minute to get familiar with the stress responses. So these are 4 instinctive stress responses. They are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fight. We've all had that experience of an extra rush of energy when under attack at some point in our lives. It's that feeling when you see harm being done to a child or an innocent victim, and you want to just jump in and save the situation or save the child, right? You get that extra burst of energy. I'm going to go do it, even if there's no logical thought out plan of how. I need to fix the situation. Or when you're driving and you're nearly hit by a car and in the last minute you swerve and get out in the nick of time, that is your fight response. Then we have the flight response. That's that feeling in your gut that tells you run. There's this sense that tells you you must get out. When presented with a task that you feel is too overwhelming for you, your immediate reaction may be to run away from it or hide. This response can be wonderfully adaptive. For at times, we must get out of a situation to ensure our safety. Another response is the freeze response. The freeze response is when you feel immobile, like when you hear a siren and you know you need to go seek shelter, but your body freezes in its place and you can't move. Oftentimes, more casualties happen during natural disasters when individuals freeze instead of taking immediate action to seek shelter or safety. Understanding this, it's a freeze response. It's not that you didn't know to get out, it's a trauma response. The body just froze. Lastly, we have fawn. Fawn is a response when we seek safety by pleasing and bending to the needs and wishes of others, specifically kidnapper, abuser, attacker. The perfect example of this would be Stockholm Syndrome, when the victim develops positive feelings towards their captive. That is also a stress response. We're going to talk about the long-term effects of prolonged stress. And what does that even mean? So it's not surprising that if we were to be exposed to long-term stress, our bodies could be impacted by these systemic changes. When this happens over a prolonged period, the body may experience long-term health problems. Again, key is may experience. For example, glucocorticoids help to regulate the immune system and reduce inflammation. But when we experience chronic stress, our immune system is impaired and can result in increased risk of health like hypertension, stroke, heart attack, chronic fatigue, depression, immune disorders, diabetes. We're going to discuss something that's super important here that some of us may have been wondering. How is stress different than trauma? How do I know when an event is just, okay, I'm experiencing a normal amount of stress in my life versus maybe this is trauma, maybe this is something that I should be addressing, maybe I should be reaching out to someone to get help. In trauma, the original stressor and the body's reaction to stress already happened in the past, but somehow the symptoms are still being experienced as if it's happening right now. In other words, the impact of the stressor or the traumatic event remains way long after the threat has ended. That would be trauma. Trauma can develop after a single event that's life-threatening or perceived as life-threatening. Remember, we said before that what you experience and what I experience are going to be different. So for one person, it might be not traumatic and it might not be perceived as life-threatening. But for another person, they perceive this as life-threatening and so therefore may develop trauma. Common examples of situations likely to cause trauma include military combat, assaults, hate crimes, accidents, and natural disasters. In traumatic events, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response is so intensely triggered that the person can't just turn it off once it's over. Now, compounded stress can occur when we experience multiple stress at the same time. So like we had the pandemic, and on top of the pandemic, maybe somebody lost their job, and then we have social unrest and a hate crime. So it's one on top of the other on top of the other, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the person is going to experience trauma or develop PTSD. So what are the incidents of trauma? We have on this slide is from the Jewish Federation of North America Center for Aging and Trauma. And it shows the lifetime cycle, the lifetime incidence of trauma in various groups. In addition to this information, 35% of children exposed to community violence develop PTSD, and 15% of individuals may develop PTSD after a shooting. Past experience of trauma increase our vulnerability to future PTSD when encountering traumatic events later on in life. This is especially true when there's a lack of preparedness and the original trauma has not yet been addressed. Being prepared is a way in which PTSD can be prevented from developing even after experiencing a traumatic event. We're going to talk about preparedness in just a bit, but before we do that, let's talk about how to recognize when stress becomes trauma. Psychological trauma is a common event involving threat or perceived threat to one's life, injury, or violence. Most people can overcome it. PTSD is less common and develops when symptoms from a psychological trauma disrupts daily functioning. It lasts longer and it's more difficult for people to, again, just get over it. The telltale signs of trauma are: we have avoidance, avoiding activities, situations, memories, or any trigger of the original traumatic event. We have hypervigilance and hyperalertness, being easily startled and feeling at risk without a threat actually being present, checking surroundings constantly, feeling like someone's going to attack or something bad's going to happen at any moment. Another one is nightmares and flashbacks. When one experiences nightmares and flashbacks, it can be where we're kind of, the person's re-experiencing the event and it's so vivid. We have loss of trust in the world. Other problems that we might experience, that we might have when experiencing PTSD, problems with sleep, memory, being forgetful, easily distracted, intrusive thoughts, symptoms of depression, anxiety, or being easily angered. I am going to pass the baton back onto my dear colleague.
Thank you, Leah. And I want to take a moment to just highlight how significant and how important it is for us to understand how stress and trauma can develop and how it can affect us, because the rest of the presentation is built on that awareness and that understanding. So thank you, Leah, for showing us all how all that works in our system. But just to quickly review. So stress happens in the environment and will demand a response. For example, a toddler that is running into the street must be run after. If a car is swerving, demands we slam the brakes. If our pipes freeze, we turn off the water main. If the tornado sirens go off, we run to the safe room. And if we see something, we say something. When this happens, our body releases good amounts of cortisol and adrenaline, activates our body to help us succeed. So that's why we feel that rush of energy, we get our heart pumping, we can move faster because of all the blood going to our muscles and all the extra attention to our breathing, and then we can get the job done. But it doesn't always work like that. So as Leah explained, the release of cortisol can be adaptive when we have something to do. When we cannot fight or flight, we may feel unease, discomfort, anxiety. We make a sense of lack of being well within ourselves, get a headache, experience fear, or feel angry, or feel frustrated. And this presents significant challenges to everyone during the recent hostage situation, as Leah said, for 10 hours, when we felt that rush of changes within us, but there was not much we could do other than trust in the responding authorities. So our bodies may have gone into this fight or flight, but we had to stay put at home. So when stress is prolonged, whether because a singular event is lasting very long or because there are multiple events that are stressful going on, our body can be affected by that chronically elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline. And not only can the body be affected, but also our neurobiology. So our response to new challenges will now be affected by the impact of past experiences. And as this vicious cycle continues, it can move on to affect neural pathways in our brain that may make us feel hypervigilant. It can affect our endocrine system with elevated cortisol, affecting our ability to sleep and be rested in the morning. But it can also impact us in more ways that we are not aware of, even impacting our own genes. This is what we refer to as the epigenetics of trauma, the effect that traumatic events can have on our physiology, on our biology, and even our genetics. So let me provide an example that illustrates the importance of the new research on epigenetics. Telomeres are these caps that protect our chromosomes from the deterioration that leads to disease and actually aging. When we get older, our telomeres will tend to get shorter. And when we experience trauma, our telomeres will tend to get shorter. What is come out from recent science is that we can undo this damage and actually grow back our telomeres. So we know from research on the biology of stress, on Holocaust survivors and on veterans, that prolonged stress affects their bodies, making them more prone to illness. And actually, this impact also affects their own children. The good news is that scientists have now shown that the therapeutic interventions for stress and even trauma not only improve how we feel, but actually cause positive epigenetic changes, even lengthening our genes' telomeres, certainly increasing our resilience to the effects of future stressors. And these are the things that are the core of the tools and strategies that we will introduce today. So science on this is certainly growing and much remains to be discovered. Yet we already know that the effects of epigenetic transmission of trauma can be undone. And we understand the power of evidence-based psychological therapies that support such healing. So if known interventions can regulate our cortisol function and even grow our telomeres, then we know just how important it is not only to heal past traumas, but to learn these skills so that proactively we can build our own resilience to protect us from developing trauma when exposed to stressful events. So when we talk about resilience, we'll be talking about two different huge components. One is the things that we individually can do to improve our strength, our ability to cope, our ability to withstand the things that happen to us in life. And another whole level is the things that we as individuals and as a community can do to increase our resilience to potentially stressful or traumatic events. So resilience is a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or any significant source of stress. And we can improve our resilience by increasing social networks and all kinds of adaptive coping skills. I want to go over 6 different things we can do right now that will increase our resilience this moment. And as we move forth with these 6 strategies, will improve our resilience in the long run. Number 1, building social networks and social connections. So we all know how critical social support is. We know what it felt like when we couldn't have it during the pandemic. We know how important social support was in the aftermath of the hostage situation recently, when many of us came together as a community in prayer and gratitude and had this incredibly holding, healing experience as a community. Prioritizing and expanding the depth and the breadth of our social networks is super important. We need to have different types of support. Sometimes we need information, sometimes we need practical assistance, sometimes we need somebody to listen to us, emotionally supporting us with an empathetic ear. And we need support from different settings, for different sources. We need support from our loved ones, from our community, from our neighbors, and from global sources. Some examples of things that build social support can include participating in community events that honor first responders, expressing gratitude for their service, joining our synagogues, our schools, and our federation when they do special events like that. We also need to be mindful to return to our places of worship and support one another and fight the natural tendency of avoidance to not go back, to stay away. Just like we tell the child who has fallen from the bike, you need to get back on the bike. We can also participate in community events that build relationships across faiths, across organizations, outside of the Jewish community, outside of the JFS or Federation communities. Reach out to our neighbors, the street neighbors, our neighbors in faith, our neighbors in our cities, in our counties. In other words, connect, reach, and support one another. Number 2, fostering wellness. Just like the pandemic, many struggle to keep structure in their lives. It is always important to maintain wellness, especially in times of a crisis, and even more so when we do not know how long the crisis will last. So think about self-care, eating healthy, staying well hydrated, maintaining regular activity, movement, or even exercise, because all of these things will reduce the toll of stress on our body and also help us manage anxiety and depression. Other things we can do: maintain healthy schedules and habits, foster structure, a sense of order, and facilitate restorative sleep. Mindfulness as well as prayer, meditation, gratitude journaling, or yoga can increase our well-being, positivity, and also restores our hope. And we should also try to avoid negative outlets. Of course, we all know we shouldn't overuse alcohol and drugs, but many of us have fallen into excessive TV watching or gaming, which may temporarily mask the distress we're feeling. But the truth is that this kind of coping, which may seem helpful at first, it is not as adaptive in the long run. So remember moderation. Number 3, embracing positive thoughts. This includes maintaining perspective, avoiding irrational thoughts or catastrophizing, accepting change and that which we cannot change, remain hopeful and optimistic by cultivating a positive outlook. And this may include being mindful of what we're thinking, knowing that we want to visualize what we want and not what we fear. And of course, learning from past experiences, paying attention to our good coping and successes in the past, and try to focus on the silver linings. Try to be grateful for the things that are good in our lives. Number 4, finding purpose. How do we live a life with a sense of purpose and meaning? We can focus on our identity, identify what things bring me value, what things give you a sense of worth, what are your priorities, and then try to figure out how can we engage our life according to those values. So be proactive. What can I do right now to improve my situation? Break the challenges into meaningful and manageable parts, things that you can actually do every day to go in the direction of what you're wanting to accomplish, and help others. We all know how good we feel when we volunteer, when you assist friends or family, when we extend the hand to others. And if anything else, try to set realistic goals and seek self-discovery, self-growth, and improvement, and share your values with your loved ones. 5, seeking help. Knowing when we cannot do it alone and having a backup plan with even names of those who might help us or agencies in our community and the services that they may have so we can seek a referral can be very important. Try to honor yourself by knowing your limits. And remember that seeking help is not a weakness, but an act of self-love. And now let me move to a very important aspect of our presentation: prevention and preparedness. Having the actual knowledge on how we should manage emergencies can help us bypass the freeze response. And having a larger number of coping skills and adaptive tools we can comfortably use can increase the likelihood that we will use those coping strategies in a time of a crisis. So knowing what to do in different situations, in different potentially difficult situations, can help us not to freeze, fight, flight, or fawn when we find ourselves in those situations. So don't let the fear or the fear of facing fear keep you from being prepared. As it turns out, there's nothing that can dispel fear better than facing it. All right, so what are the things that we can do? We need to have knowledge, we need to have a plan, and we need to have rehearsal of a plan so we can increase our self-efficacy to actually do these things when the time comes. For example, we had a winter storm, And many of us knew we might have to shut our water mains, but many didn't know where the main was, or they might have known where the main was, but they had never tried to shut it, so they didn't know they might need a special wrench or tool to close the main. So plan, practice, and show your family members how to address those emergencies. When we face an earthquake or a tornado, we need to know what our safety plan would be and ensure that all our family members know what to do in case that were to happen. I used to live in Omaha, and during a bad year of tornadoes in Tornado Alley, as we call it, I ended up setting a teepee in the unfinished basement. I had it full of supplies, I had a battery-operated radio and flashlights, but I also put snacks and stuffed animals and blankets for my kids' comfort. So if you know that an emergency is possible, you can plan and prepare and help those around you do as well. So as we return to our schools and our synagogues and other Jewish agencies, it's upon us to know where the emergency exits are and take part in emergency preparedness programs that are offered by our leaders. So what does it mean to actually prepare? And how can we do about preparing ourselves, our families, and communities? Of course, every one of you who's here today is doing just that. Our communities have been putting together many resources and presentations and training sessions that have been prepared by professionals to help us respond and manage challenging events like the ones we most recently experienced by our neighbors at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville. We need to remember that a lot of thought and planning and work and resources have gone into putting these presentations. And there are so many of them. We have active shooter trainings and of course CPR and first aid. We have Stop the Bleed and Run, Hide, and Fight. And we have a situational awareness courses that our community has been putting and offering to all of us. So when you receive the invitation to join, please attend these opportunities. We must all do our part. So as you can see, preparedness involves both action in our communities as well as improvements within ourselves. We do not only prepare by knowing how to use an extinguisher or finding the emergency exit or administer CPR or turn off the water main. We must also prepare ourselves psychologically, build our inner resources, learn new skills, and then teach them to others. And it's also important, and I think Leah did a great job of emphasizing this, that we must know our limits and know when to seek help, when there is too much going on that we cannot handle on our own. And remember that doing so is not only an expression of self-love, but also an assertion of communal responsibility. So let me move forward and introduce you to a concept that I found absolutely fascinating. This is the idea of post-traumatic growth, that after a traumatic event, we can all experience growth. Actually, Tedeschi and Calhoun coined this term in the 1990s, and it is a positive change that occurs in the aftermath of struggling with a major crisis or traumatic event. And they found that approximately 50% of people will actually experience post-traumatic growth after enduring a trauma. Now, those of you who have read Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, you know that people can thrive after trauma by seeking, finding, or imposing meaning on their experiences. And there are so many things that we can keep in mind about post-traumatic growth. And here is a list of things that we know can lead us to that. So I experienced post-traumatic growth vicariously after the big earthquake in Mexico City in 1985, when, as you know, 45,000 people perished in a couple of days. My grandma had come live in my home after her apartment had been destroyed. And although she had been a great grandma up to that point, I have to tell you that going through all those boxes of pictures, because of this traumatic event, gave us an opportunity to talk about what mattered most to her and revisit many other traumas that she had endured in her life. By the time 3 months had passed, I had in my hand this grandma I had never imagined. Her character changed, her personality had changed. She lived the remaining 15 years of her life being at peace with herself, being joyful, enjoying each other, just like all of the things that we read here on this slide that we can attain through post-traumatic growth. So moving on to some of the coping skills that we can use to help us during difficult times. To better withstand challenges and stressors, there are many things that we can do that help us regulate the nervous system and protect our body from the potential impact of stress. Art, nature, exercise, water, all of these things can help us regulate the nervous system. They help us increase the release of our natural neurotransmitters like serotonin and endorphins and dopamines, the same neurotransmitters that reduce the likelihood of depression or anxiety, the experience of pain, that improve our sleep, and that increase our overall sense of well-being. So look at the list and look at things that you can start doing yourself or do with your family members to improve your adjustment at any single time. Reduce the overreactivity, regulate your systems so that when a big stressor comes at you, you are in a state of balance. You are living with a state of harmonious, good coping level, and you're not as easily triggered from this stressful traumatic event into a traumatic response or even PTSD. So among the things here, there's a couple of things I want to review. And one is shake. We don't teach our kids to shake, but they do it naturally, and somehow we think we shouldn't do that as we get older. When we're feeling stress in our body, when we feel stress in our shoulders, when we feel stress in our joints, yes, we can do yoga, we can stretch gently, but sometimes we only have a couple of seconds. So at that time, what I do is I shake. So you can just try this right now. You can just shake your hands, and after you do this for a couple of seconds and you stop, you will feel that incredible tingling, relaxation, and a release. If you were to do that with your whole body, you can always put some music to do that, you will feel your whole body releasing that tension, that stress from itself, and feel more prepared for whatever you have at hand. There are other things that we can do. Using weighted blankets can be very soothing for somebody that is in a situation where they can lay down or be in a couch and relax. We can do that with children when they're overactive as well. It's very soothing and calming of the nervous system. We can also put our hands on our hearts. And if you'll be so kind to try this with me, we're moving into a very active part of our presentation. So just the act of putting your hand in your heart and paying attention to the heart. You can put the other hand also right there. That brings my attention into myself. It's a soothing experience. Now, kids like to do other things that are a little more fun. So let me teach you a different option. You can put your hands in front of you, cross them over, and turn them, and then grab the fingers and bring them over and lay them on your heart. This is an activation of the nervous system in a complex way that brings immediate sense of calm, and it helps us feel grounded. So when we're experiencing a difficult situation, we can do these very simple strategies. And to these, we can add some deep breathing. We can close our eyes and allow this state of relaxation and calm to overcome us in the most sweet way. We can do this between appointments. We can do this before we enter a difficult meeting where we're going to be required to act, make decisions, and this can be very soothing. So another options for those of you that practice yoga is to do eagle arms. This is also very soothing. Or for those of you that tend to struggle with tension headaches, then putting a hand on your forehead and one on the back of your head. You can close your eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. If you have somebody in your home that can assist you, you can just relax and allow them to put their hands in your forehead and back. This can release the tension, helps the body calm down. It's very soothing, and it can release the tension that can lead to a headache. So now let's go ahead and practice some breathing exercises. First, I want to introduce you to something you already know, but you haven't used in this way, and that is blowing bubbles. Imagine that you have one of those little ones and you're going to put it in that container with soap, and then you're going to blow bubbles. Of course, if you were to blow very fast, the bubble would burst and you would not have little bubbles. So this exercise can help you regulate the speed at which you exhale. You take a deep breath and you blow. If you were to do this 3 times, imagining you're blowing bubbles, you will experience how your whole body starts to calm down. Take a deep breath and blow. Take a deep breath and blow. Just doing this, even though I'm leading the exercise, my whole body calms down. It becomes more grounded, more soothed. And this is something that we can do with everyone. Of course, there's other skills that you can add to blowing bubbles, like imagining that you're actually at a park, surrounded in nature, full of trees and flowers, blowing bubbles, little bubbles going out, being played around by the wind, your grandkids or your kids running around the bubbles. Now you have introduced a full visualization that adds to the mere act of breathing properly with a positive image that further soothes and calms the body. So many times we do that. We look at photographs of things that are calming, or we experience something, we go on our mind to a memory of a place that is particularly soothing or calming to us when we're doing a breathing exercise. You can imagine yourself in a hammock. You can imagine yourself sitting in a chair overlooking the ocean. You know what things are soothing to you. You know what experiences you've had in the past that may bring that calm and relaxation. So in the next 5 minutes, I want to introduce you to an active strategy that will help you accomplish something that is very special. You can use this to calm your body's alert system. You can use this to help you fall asleep at night. These are great strategies derived from cognitive behavioral therapy and evidence-based treatment approach to manage anxiety and depression. So sleep disorders use these strategies for treatment as well. So these are key elements that that we can start building as we do when we go in life and we learn a little yoga or start running and have that sense of endorphins running in our system. And we're exploring different things and different tools that we can use in our life. So let's practice diaphragmatic breathing by putting one hand in the chest and one in the belly. The hands on the chest will expand as the lungs expand. The hand on the belly will expand as the diaphragm moves out of the way, allowing even more air and more restful, profound breathing to happen in our body. So we breathe in, taking a deep breath, allowing the hand on the belly to expand and move forward, and then we exhale. When you practice on your own, make a notice to do it in front of a mirror and notice if your shoulders are going up when you're breathing. If you're breathing in like this, that's probably shallow breath. You want to practice maintaining your shoulders down and only your belly expanding as you breathe in. So we'll do it one more time. Allowing a place of relaxation, a state of relaxation and calm to come to our body. These kinds of exercises are good for almost anyone in any situation. I want to do a little more with them, but if you were to experience any unpleasant sensations, you can just go back to natural breathing. If you were to feel out of breath or dizzy or nervous, just shorten the length of the exhale, come back to your natural breathing. You can use any of the skills I mentioned before, like the self-hug or the twister hands, to regulate your system. And you can also use the chat option if you want to talk to one of our counselors. So let's move and do a practice as the last thing we will do today before a Q&A. So put your hand on your belly and take one more breath. And now move your hands to your lap. Pay attention to your body being supported, the chair holding your thighs, the floor holding your feet, the back of the chair supporting your back. Feel grounded and supported. If you are comfortable, feel free to close your eyes as I have done. The brain will command the body. And remember, the brain can only do one of two things. What the brain has been trained to do, either by habit or by actual effort to create new habits, or what we command it to do. So right now, we're going to use the second of these options. We're going to command the brain to relax our body. And we're going to experience how that can actually happen. So we take a deep breath and we exhale. And bring our attention to our feet. I want you to imagine, to visualize your feet. See them in your mind. Imagine that you are seeing your feet, and then command the feet to relax. Feet, relax. You can repeat after me in your mind the command to your feet to relax. Feet, relax. Releasing all tension, letting go of any unnecessary tension. Welcoming any sensation of tingling or heaviness or a certain lightness of being. Now we imagine, we visualize our legs, our lower legs and our upper legs, from the ankles to the knees and from the knees to the hips. We visualize the legs, the front and the back, all of those big muscles. We see them in our mind and we command them to relax. Legs, relax, relax. Releasing all tension and welcoming any sensations we might experience of relaxation, whether heaviness or tingling or a certain lightness of being. Now visualize your torso from your hips to your shoulders, the front, including the abdomen and the chest, and the back, the lower back and the upper back. All those large muscles. Visualize your torso and command it to relax. Relax. Releasing all unnecessary tension, welcoming a state of harmony and harmonious workings of all of those incredible organs in our torso, the stomach, the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, all the large and small organs working in harmony in our body, supporting our health and our well-being. We now visualize the shoulders, the arms, and the hands. We see them in our mind, from the shoulder to the elbow, the biceps and the triceps. We visualize the arms and the hands and the fingers and the thumbs. We see them clearly in our mind, and we command them to relax. Relax. Letting go of any unnecessary tension, tingling likely in our hands and fingers, a release of tension experienced in our shoulders. And now we visualize the head, the face, and the neck. We see the neck in our mind, the face, the forehead, the cheeks, the mouth, the jaw, every part of the neck, head, and face. All those small and minute muscles, all of them, we command you to relax, relax, relax. And now we gently scan the body, experiencing a deep and profound sense of relaxation. If there is any part of the body that we find is still holding tension, we bring that part of the body back to our awareness. We visualize it, we see it in our minds, and we command it to relax, relax, releasing all tension, all tension. And here we take another deep breath. Becoming aware that we all have the power to guide our body into a state of relaxation. We can breathe deeply using some of the skills provided today. We can bring ourselves back to a body scan release of tension, as we have just done. A simple strategy that we can all use. And to the count of 3, we will come back to our awareness, to the place where we are right now. 1, bringing attention to our toes and fingers, gently moving our hands and our toes. 2, becoming mindful and aware of where we are, the chair in which we sit, the room around us, our location, the sounds around us. And 3, we open our eyes and we come to this beautiful state of peace, of relaxation. It is a very simple set of skills that you were introduced to today that I hope that you will try to expand on. Each of you may have already had different levels of ability with many of these skills, but I want to introduce you to a couple of apps that you can download to help you with a daily practice to reduce your tension. Breathing app and Breathe to Relax. With that said, I want to move into our Q&A session and give you an opportunity to ask questions about any part of our presentation today, knowing that we at JFS have many services available. If you ever experience a stressful situation and you need assistance with, if you have experienced many traumatic events, are now wondering if you might need some support, expert support and assistance to move you through this journey, please reach out to us at JFS.